Orlando.
Welcome to the OZone.
Welcome to the OZone.
Welcome to the OZone. Welcome to the OZone.
The voice of Magic fans.
Welcome back to another episode of the OZone podcast, the voice of Magic fans. In the virtual studio today, we have Justin.
Yo.
Al.
What's going on?
Myself, Anthony, and a very special guest joining us, former Magic forward and current broadcasting announcer, Jeff Turner.
Hey guys, glad to be here.
Thank you for coming on, Jeff. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. I've staying busy during this off time. So what's happened is my season's cut short, as you guys know. So all the things that my wife had set aside, you guys probably not old enough to know, but you have honeydew chores, right? In the summer when the season's over. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been accomplishing that. So I'm running out of things. I need the season to come back before she continues to find more things for me to do.
It seems like those things never end, huh?
They don't. I don't know how this list keeps expanding. It seems like it should be a finite list of things to do, and at least I could maybe get out and get on my bike or play golf or something, but it just doesn't seem to work like that.
If your wife is anything like my wife, she'll end up finding more and new challenges and objectives to do for the household.
Sounds like there's a lot in common between our wives.
Absolutely. So other than that, Jeff, what are some of the things that you've been doing to kind of keep yourself busy during this time frame?
Well, again, I just, from an exercise standpoint, I get out. I am getting out. We get out and walk quite a bit. I've my projects that have kept me busy around the house. I've built a new patio on my back, in the back of my house. And yeah, it's been fun. I'm just trying different things. And now that things have begun to open up a little bit more, trying to get out. I've just been very cautious. So I'm trying to get out, maybe play golf once a week at least, just to get outside. I just love being outside. Yeah. So spend a lot of time outdoors anyway. So, just kind of waiting and, watching a lot of replays of old games and, whether they're classic Magic games or, stuff that's playing, the NBA finals, they've been rerunning everything. So doing a lot of reading, just trying to stay ready if this thing ever gets going again.
How are you feeling about the Last Dance documentary? It's kind of been on everyone's to watch list.
And that's been fun. It's been fun for me for a couple of reasons. One is my two daughters they're 26 and 23 now. So my oldest was born just as my career was finishing up. She was 2 when I retired, and my youngest never really, obviously other than videos and things like that, has really never seen action where I'm in the game. In fact, those two have grown up in the LeBron, Kobe era, and they've always questioned whether the video that I have is all fake news, that it can't possibly, I can't possibly be athletic enough to have played with LeBron and Kobe. And I always tell them, well, someday maybe you'll see video of a guy by the name of Michael Jordan, who, I had a chance to play with in 1984 on the Olympic team, plus, compete head to head, through the 80s and 90s. So it's been fun kind of watching the series through their eyes, and they're getting an appreciation for not only how good Michael was, but the intensity that he played with.
That is awesome. Now, how's it felt for you to go back in time and watching those old games, as you were watching the Magic back in the days, to go back and watch, the Shaq and Penny era, watching yourself play with those guys? How good does that feel to relive those moments again?
It's fun. I think from now, now that I'm, my job is as an analyst, look at the game. I did a little bit of coaching at the high school level here. And so the thing I find interesting, going back and watching the classic games, for instance, and you go back and, those 89, 90 teams, and you really go back and you look at the way the game was played, the spacing on the floor, it was very everything was inside the 3-point line, a lot of post-ups. And then you kind of move forward, and it's not that long of a period, 4 or 5 years, where now you add Shaquille O'Neal into the mix, and you begin to see, if you watch the games, so now Nick Anderson and Dennis Scott are drifting further and further from the basket. There's more spacing. Yes, it's post-centered because Shaquille's in there, but now because he's drawing double teams, it really opens up the floor. So I think just watching how the game changed just in those 5-6 years from when the Magic started is really kind of interesting. And just from a strategy of watching the way Matt Guokas coached the team, and then Brian Hill, once he got Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway, the way it changed. And then on top of that, the development of Nick Anderson and Dennis Scott. Just from those very first games and just watching those two, and they were terrific basketball players. And I just don't think they get enough credit when we start talking about those teams, and especially that 94-95 team.
When you watch those games now, does it still surprise you of how much the game has changed since then? The way
it really does.
The style of the game and how it is now.
Yeah, it really is. It really is interesting. It was a funny. I think in the first classic game they showed, I believe, was the win over Detroit in the preseason. So I'm sitting there with my daughter watching the game. I get an offensive rebound, and I'm going back up, and Scott Hastings, who was a member of the Pistons at the time, just levels me. I mean, just, arm head on the head, across the head. And my daughter just was like, screams. And she's like, Dad, he just tried to take your head off. And I said, well, that's the way we played back then. There was no easy layups. It put people at the free throw line. It was just a different era, right? I mean, you guys, in watching it are probably shocked, sometimes at, the amount of contact, the Jordan rules and the way the Pistons played them. Even those great Knicks teams of the 90s with Pat Riley were very physical. The game, I think, in some ways, well, I won't say some ways, in a lot of ways is better today because there is more freedom of movement. And so, they protect the players a little bit more, and we see the athleticism and everything. But the competitive part of those games in the 80s and 90s in particular, it's hard to match that because you had to earn everything. Right. And it didn't matter if you were Jeff Turner or Michael Jordan, you had to earn it. And that's just the way the game was played.
Yeah. And now, in your opinion, do you wish the game was more like it used to be, that old school way, that old school basketball? Personally, even though I'm a little younger, I do miss when I watch the highlights of Jordan and the old school, the bad boys, the Detroit Pistons. I kind of wish and say, hey, I wish, that would happen today, that you could see LeBron going for a layup and just get taken out. Like, you don't see that anymore. So in your opinion, would that be better for the game, or you think it's improved with the new rules?
I think that the game itself, the way it's played with the spacing, the movement, the way the rules are set up, in that sense, the game is better. I do think at times, it's just the way it is. I do think that we protect the offensive player quite a bit. The consistency of being able to referee hand checking and bumps in the lane and things like that, it really does give a lot of advantage to the offensive player, which probably is what fans want. So, that's okay. It's hard to say. I think maybe a happy medium somewhere in between, not those grueling 93-86 games where, the fourth quarter, everybody's scoring at the free throw line. That nobody wants to watch that. But still, from a defensive standpoint, everything is not an intentional flagrant foul. Sometimes it's just a hard foul. And so I think, there is a common ground, maybe a middle that we could reach on that would make the game better. But it's hard to argue with how good the game of basketball is right now.
That's a pretty interesting take. So for some of us, let's say we're not familiar or as familiar with Jeff Turner, could you tell us a little bit about, what growing up was like, how your love for basketball was shaped, and some of those influential players that you looked up to on kind of your trajectory into playing basketball.
Okay. Well, I grew up in an era where you really didn't specialize, right? You just played everything. And so my first love was baseball. When I was a kid, I didn't dream of being in the NBA. I dreamed of, one day, pitching, for the Braves, or, something,
Wow.
along those lines, or playing first base, hitting a home run or anything. My hero growing up was Hank Aaron. I was a Braves fan. I grew up in Central Florida. And so that was our team, all the Atlanta, the Superstation teams, right? And so, I followed his career and, his journey, and loved him. And it wasn't until later, that I got into basketball. And then, you get drawn to stars, right? And for me, growing up, as a kid in the early 70s and everything, there's this guy that played in the ABA and then went on with the New Jersey Nets, with the big afro, named Julius Erving, went by Dr. J. And we all, lowered the goal in our yards and tried to do all the things that Dr. J could do. So, that was my first real basketball influence. When it was the great story is, when I got to high school, I still loved baseball. That was still my favorite sport. So I tried out my sophomore year. I was about 6'5". So I went to try out for the baseball team, and there was a senior that played first base and pitched a little bit in front of me and everything. And I'll never forget, the coach, nice guy, pulled me aside and he said, Jeff, there comes a time when we have to make a decision on what sport we play. And I'm thinking maybe that you need to decide on basketball. So in his way, he was cutting me from baseball. He was telling me my baseball career was over. My strike zone was too big. I couldn't hit a curveball. And that I needed to move on to basketball. So from that time on, that's pretty much it. I dedicated myself to, getting better, and I grew to about 6'8" by my senior year of high school. And that was it. Got recruited by several schools, mostly in the South, and chose to go to Vanderbilt University. And 4 years there, and then on to the NBA.
I think that's interesting, because there's always been discussions held that there's a lot of benefits for an athlete that plays different sports, and how that is able to contribute to whatever your main sport is. So how do you feel as if whatever you learned in baseball really transitioned to your game on the hardwood?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, guys. I think the first thing I think is if you play multiple sports, or you dabble in them, whatever that may be, the first thing is you just kind of learn. You learn to be a competitor, right? And then the advantage is, I think, there are very few people that are great in all things, right? So I thought I was a pretty good baseball player, but obviously I got to a point where I wasn't necessarily a star or anything like that. Basketball, for high school and into college, I was a starter. I was one of the guys. Playing those multiple sports growing up, where you're not always the best, I think you appreciate the work that goes in to being really good at one sport. Teaches you a little humility at times as well. And so I think that's important. And I also think the cross training, baseball requires a lot of, hand-eye coordination, things like that. It's very detail oriented. And I think all those things help me as a basketball player eventually.
Awesome. Yeah, and excited. That's usually how it is. When you play multiple sports, eventually some of those skills you learned in the past help you later on in your career. Now, talking a little bit about basketball and sports in general, growing up, who were some of your favorite, besides baseball, and in basketball specifically, who do you shape your game after?
Well, I think I told you I was, a fan of Dr. J, but, obviously, if you look at highlights, I didn't possess any of the skills that Dr. J, from a physical standpoint, possessed. So, you start looking at different players and, who who you like, who you don't like. I was always because of Julius Erving, kind of growing up being a fan of his, I became a Philadelphia 76er fan. And so, watching them a little bit, seeing Bobby Jones, who was a great player from North Carolina, just, kind of a jack of all trades, could do, shoot it a little bit, was a great defender, things like that. Again, probably he's a little bit more athletic than me. Growing up in the South and watching SEC basketball, I was always drawn to, a guy like a Dan Issel, who played at Kentucky. Knew a lot of, there are just so many. I mean, I was one of those kids back in my day, you didn't have basketball on every night. You had to wait for the
That's true.
the Sunday game of the week on CBS or whatever that was, and so then you're exposed to so many more players and everything. So it's just kind of fun just watching guys, as I got bigger and stronger and thought, okay, well, I'm gonna be a post player or something like that. I'd watch the great Bob McAdoo, a big guy that could shoot it a little bit. Truck Robinson that, played with the Knicks a little bit for a long time. Guys like that. And you're thinking, that's, those are guys like I'd be like to be that guy or something. So I don't know if it was any one player, but you just, I always say whether it was like I was playing tennis or baseball or whatever it was, we learned by watching guys on TV and stuff. And then you would go out and you would try to mimic them, right? Like you would try to, shoot like your favorite player, or, if you're playing tennis, could you serve like John McEnroe or, the one of those guys, and just kind of, you just learned how to play that game more by just repetition and mimicking guys. And so, we just made it a game of how many guys we could do. Do you guys remember, like, playing baseball? You guys remember, have you ever seen video of the great Louis Tiant, that, played for pitch for the Red Sox and everything? He would, he was this guy that he would turn his back in his windup. He would come so far back, he would look into center field and then come around and throw. And so, if you, we'd be playing out in the sandlot, and he was like, oh, today you're that guy, and that's how we learn. That's, we'd watch and we'd just imitate. So I don't know if that answers your question, but, it was like everybody, you were a fan of everybody.
Thinking about, what Dr. J meant to you as a fan, and him playing for the Nets, although the New York Nets at that time, and you being drafted by the New Jersey Nets, how did having a similarity to a player that you enjoyed watching, how did that draft process work for you?
Well, the draft, there's, the great story with the draft is, that when we watch the NBA draft nowadays, it's a big production, right? It's like you've got all this going on. The players are all there. They're in the green room. My draft in 1984, which, a lot of people think is one of the greatest draft classes in history, the seniors, a lot of us were in Bloomington, Indiana. We were a part of the 1984 Olympic team, at least six or seven of us. There were 23 teams in the NBA then. There weren't really opportunities to be seen like there are today. I think, as far as from a television standpoint, it was, we were at televised games, but you really didn't see other conferences as much back in the early 80s. Not until ESPN kind of came along and did Big East basketball. You might be able to catch some West Coast games. So when the draft comes, you really don't know a lot of these, the guys, the names on the list. So I'm in Bloomington, Indiana. And so what happens is the guys that are draft eligible, they took us to a television studio in Bloomington, and we're all sitting in a conference room. And so I'm sitting in a conference room with Michael Jordan and Sam Perkins. It's Alvin Robertson, Vern Fleming, Leon Wood. We're all sitting here and we're waiting. What they would do is you're listening, can't see what's going on, but you're listening to the draft. And so, it comes on, Akeem Olajuwon goes to the Rockets, Sam Bowie to Portland with the third pick in the NBA draft. Chicago Bulls select Michael Jordan. So Michael gets up out of his seat and he walks into the television studio where they've got a chair. And so they, put the headset on him and he's talking to Louis Carnesecca and Al Albert. They're the guys that are doing the draft. And they have a little exchange. And then Michael gets up and he goes and he sits in the television station waiting room, right? But he doesn't come back into the conference room where we are. So we have no idea. Where is Michael? Is he sitting on the van waiting for the rest of us or what? Go down. Sam Perkins is taken, I think, with the fourth pick. Alvin Robertson, maybe 8th. Leon Wood, 10th. And I remember sitting in there. It's just Vern Fleming and I are the only ones in the conference room. Neither of us have any idea who's going to select us. We haven't heard. Nobody's contacted us. We don't have a phone in our hand talking to our agents or anything like that. Didn't have cell phones. No way to get in touch. And we're going along. And so with the 16th pick, the Utah Jazz select John Stockton. The New Jersey Nets are on the clock. I haven't talked to New Jersey. I have no idea. Vern Fleming is from New York. And he knows, and he's hoping he doesn't go to New Jersey because apparently New Jersey's not very good. And so with the 17th pick, the New Jersey Nets select Jeff Turner out of Vanderbilt University. So I am in shock. I had no idea. I don't know much about New Jersey at that time. And so I go into the studio, and in the background I can hear boos going on, right? In my headset.
Oh, man.
No, it's like, here's a kid. I play in the Southeastern Conference in New Jersey. Remember, the television's different. I'm guessing in New York City, they're probably not watching a lot of SEC basketball, especially Vanderbilt University. So they got no clue. And I'm like, well, okay, that's the way it goes. But I'm thinking the whole time, I got to get out of here. I'm starving. I got to go get something to eat. We got practice in an hour. I'm thinking two things. Man, I hope Michael's not waiting on that van because he'll be pissed, right? And then I'm thinking, man, I hope Vern gets picked really quick so we can get out of here so I can go get something to eat. Vern gets selected with the very next pick by the Indiana Pacers. Sure enough, Jordan and them, they're not on the van. They're waiting for us. We all go in. We all go to McDonald's. We get something to eat, right? And then we go to practice. So that's my draft story. A little bit different than what you see now.
Just a little bit.
Didn't get to celebrate, didn't get to put on my Nets cap or anything like that. I had to go right to the gym and listen to Bobby Knight scream at me for an hour. So probably not what most people experience on their draft night.
I think it's awesome to hear the difference of how communication is from how it was then to now. If you're sitting down listening to the radio to find out, when you're getting drafted, to where now players are finding out firsthand through Twitter, through ESPN Watch, Shams. So it's crazy how different at times, really, not just on the court, but how we intake communication as well.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, the player workouts now, where players go around and they work out for the different teams. That just wasn't really something that the NBA teams were doing a lot of back then. Now, they did have a kind of a combine thing that was called the Aloha Classic, where you went out to Hawaii, the top seniors in the country. I did do that. They took all your measurements and all that stuff, and you got to play games for about 3 or 4 days. So there was a little bit exposure, and then obviously the Olympic trials. Every NBA GM, scout, or whatever was there evaluating, because that was a great spot, because you had a lot of the best players in the country all in one place. But yeah, you didn't have the contact that you're talking about, the agents on the phone and trying to figure out where you're going to be picked. What's really amazing is even, I think people find it hard to believe is I really don't think Michael had no idea where he was going to be picked, which is hard to believe, right?
Right.
I think he's, made it very clear that not going number 1 or 2 was, he considered it a slight. And whatever it is, 36 years later, we all ended up paying for it. So for that slight, and probably if it was a do-over, it might be different. Not sure.
Right. Right. So from the Nets, you spent some time overseas in Italy, but then you managed to come back into the NBA and find a home in Orlando. And man, what a run that was. What would you say would be your favorite moment or memory with the special run that you had in the mid-90s?
Oh man, there was just so many. For me, I went overseas. My tenure with the Nets was not the greatest. The play was okay. I was on my first year. We were a pretty good team. We made the playoffs twice when I was with New Jersey, but I felt like I needed to really get my love of the game back and had an opportunity to go overseas and play. But when the Magic then in '89 got an expansion team and I was hoping to come back to the NBA, I called my agent and said, look, I want to give this another shot. I'm ready. I would love to go to Orlando. That's where I'm from. That's where my family is. So that would be a great homecoming for me. Got lucky in that, I worked out. It was interesting. I worked out for the Minnesota Timberwolves, who were also a expansion team that year. That was kind of a free agent camp. And then I came down to Orlando and worked out individually for John Gabriel, Pat Williams, and Matt Gukas, and ended up getting a free agent contract. So being a part of that first team, obviously the excitement in Orlando, having grown up in Central Florida with no professional sports, I felt like I really had a special appreciation for what this really meant to the city of Orlando. And then really once it started and the energy that was in the building and the city, I mean, you go to the games and, nowadays with ticket prices and everything, people, for the most part, they'll buy their season tickets and you can't go to all 41 games. But back then, it was the same people in the seats all the time. It was new, it was exciting. So for me, I guess the exciting part of the whole thing is the growth of that team. 3 years of really being an expansion team, taking our lumps, and then, we're going, 21 and, 21 games in our third year, enough to get us the number 1 pick by the lottery and have the chance to get a player like Shaquille. It just changed everything. It changed the way we traveled. It's, all of a sudden now with Shaquille, the DeVosses have come on. We've got a private plane. We're moving in that direction. We're staying at the best hotels now. It just changed our entire direction. And then so quickly, that's the most amazing thing to me. Basically, you're looking in 5-6 years from an expansion team to now, playing in front of a packed house every night because, even the year after you get Penny Hardaway and you've got 2 of the most exciting young players in the league, you're no longer playing in a half-empty arena on the road. Everybody's coming to see. It became like we were a traveling rock band. I mean, people were waiting at the hotel. They wanted to, just get a glimpse of Shaquille and Penny. So I guess for me, I just – that whole time period of that growth was really, really special. And then, obviously the run in 94, 95. I mean, you think about that, guys. You've had a chance to watch the classic games and everything. So in 94, 95, when that started, we had not even won a playoff series yet. We were eliminated by Indiana, swept the year before.
Yep.
So that Boston series, that first round Boston series in that year, That's really our first playoff win. Can you imagine? I mean, that just doesn't happen. And to be it all the way to the NBA Finals, and oh, by the way, beating Michael Jordan
That's
to
true.
get through to the semifinals. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So I think that makes it even more special.
And people are still mad over that.
Now, from those years, Jeff, what is your favorite memory from that special run with the Magic? Again, 94, 95 probably is a season that
Yeah.
brings the best memories, but what is, in your personal opinion, your favorite memory of them all?
Oh boy, I think it's hard not to look at that year. There's just so many things that happened in that 94-90 season that really affected the trajectory of the franchise. Little things that people might, just not be aware of. But, obviously going into that year, for me personally, the year before in the 93-94 season, Penny's rookie year, towards the last 20 25 games, I had worked my way back into the starting lineup, but on April 17th, right as we're heading into the season, I tore my ACL, and so I knew going into the following season that we would be a much better team. The word was we were going to get Horace Grant. So for me, I worked so hard to rehabilitate that injury and came back probably too quickly, but I wanted to be a part of that because I knew how special that would be. So the addition of Horace Grant that year, we picked up Brian Shaw. We added some veteran experience in the middle, towards the end of the season. People, we signed a guy that was playing in Cyprus by the name of Daryl Armstrong. This guy comes in. We don't, it's like, what? And John Gabriel just, had a hunch, that this kid, might be able to help us somewhere someday. Didn't play, right? He was in a suit the whole time. If you watch those old clips, Daryl's up the whole time cheering and things like that. Think about that. We've added that guy who would go down, probably in Magic fan rankings, a lot of people would have him in their top 5 favorite players of all time. We added him that year. And so that, those are just little things that happened that season that were kind of special. But for me, obviously beating Jordan and the Bulls, beating Chicago, but that Indiana Pacers series, guys, I was disappointed. I understood it. When we were showing the classic games on Fox, we only showed the 4 wins in that series. The losses, other than Game 6 where they blew us out, those other 2 games 3 and 4, one of them's a triple overtime game where Rick Smits hits a banker from the elbow. Tree Rollins goes for a fake and everything. Just a great game. What a great chess match. And that series to me, I just remember every little part of that. It was just a fantastic, in my opinion, one of the great NBA matchups season-wise or series-wise in NBA history. Obviously very nice that one ended up like it did. And then after that, see, those of us that were on that team, we have some selective amnesia, if you will. So for me, the year ends right there with Game 7. The crowd is excited. We've lifted around. Anything after that, somebody said we went to Houston or something like. No, I don't remember any of that.
That never happened.
Didn't happen.
So Jeff, I mean, those stories are insane to think about. You being able to have that relationship with some of the guys that are looked at now as like kind of like folklore in a way, like they're not real, they're bigger than life in a sense. That had to be an amazing experience, and to still be associated with the Magic these many years down the line. What is that like? What are some players that you're looking at now like, oh my god, that guy is so fun to watch, that's my favorite player? Like, who are some of those guys for you?
I really like this team, and you're right. I'm very blessed to have played with, broadcast with. I didn't get a chance to play, but I was working, doing radio when Tracy McGrady came to Orlando, and so I got to know Tracy a little bit. I mean, the megastar that he has become. Grant Hill, even the disappointment of the injuries and everything, but still, just a fantastic player. So kind of, that Mount Rushmore of the Magic and everything, I've been here through that, and to still be a part of this organization after all that time, it is really a blessing. And I don't take that for granted. In fact, in the broadcast, I'm always trying to connect the past a little bit. Sometimes people say a little bit too much to the present, but I have fun with it. I think that's an important part of it. I really like the group of guys that we have now. I tell people all the time that the difference today is these players come in so young. You look back and we've watched even, with The Last Dance, and we've watched Michael Jordan, and we saw the greatness, right, when he comes into the league in 84 and 85, and he's averaging, 27, 28 points a game. But we saw that it took him 7 years, right, like to get over that hump. And he comes in at 21 years of age, and having played 3 years of college in North Carolina, and so I always am hesitant to put too many expectations on our young guys, because I really believe that as a player, your best years, your peak years are not till, I'm saying in general, there are exceptions to rules, right? But most guys, they begin to peak and really figure it out in that 26 to 27, 28, we really see the game slow down and they start to really improve. I think we saw it over the last couple of years with Nick Vucevic. It's just, the game just looks simple to him now, right? It's just, he knows who he is. He knows what he can do. It's kind of slowed down. I thought Terrence Ross, we saw that last year. He had his best year. Just really understanding who he was as a player and where his strengths were. Evan Fournier was having a great year this year, kind of moving in, right? 27 years old, starting to understand it. So I look at guys that you asked me who I'm excited about. I'm excited about all of our young guys, right? Jonathan Isaac, I think, to me, can be whatever he wants to be. Just a freak size-wise, his ability to move. I think Terrence Ross called him like a baby giraffe or something. I don't really see that, but it's just, I think he's got a huge upside. Obviously, I don't think, Aaron Gordon is kind of this, we're still waiting to see what he's going to be, right? But then I keep telling people, he's 24 years old, and he's just really just getting started, right? He's still so young. He's got more years to improve. So that's there. I love the pace at which they're developing Mo Bamba. I know people want to throw him out there and just give it to him, and there are pros and cons to that. But I think for him and his development and being 21 years old, just being able to play every day and kind of learn from Vucevic, all the little tricks and things like that, I think it's going to be beneficial down the road. And remember, so that window for him, let's say 25, right? We still got 4 more years to see what
before we get to that point.
Yeah,
right.
And then again, and then the last guy I guess I would say is Markelle. So Markelle Fultz is another one of those young guys with all this potential, but he's had a little bit of adversity, right? And so he's been set back a little bit. So maybe we're looking at a little bit further out, maybe not, just depends on him. But I look at him and I see a guy who just sees the game a little bit differently than everybody else. He plays at a pace much more mature than his age. And so I think, if he develops, the shooting obviously has to get better. I think he would, agree with that as well. But so these young guys have so much upside. I just really enjoy watching all of them. They all excite me about the promise that they have. Whether we can keep them all together, I don't. That's not my job. That's above my pay grade. So I just call what I see. Right. But I just think they're just going to be wonderful players if they continue on their trajectory and keep working.
I agree with you. I feel like the 25, 26 year range is really when, you really get the mentality development, the body development. The game starts to slow down for a lot of the players. I can only imagine what, when we first got Jonathan Isaac, he was skin on bones, and now you can kind of see where the muscle definition comes in. So I agree with you 100%. Jeff, we're going to transition into something that I'm a huge fan of. It's called In the OZone with Jeff Turner. All right, pretty simple. We're going to ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
Rapid fire, all right?
Oh, boy. All right, remember, I'm old now. My brain doesn't work very fast.
Yeah, you're good. There's no wrong answers. What is your favorite city to visit to on the
road? Chicago.
Most memorable moment as a broadcaster?
Most memorable moment as a broadcaster. Okay, so this one, I was doing radio. I broke into broadcasting. David Steele basically got me into broadcasting. It was right. I retired in '96 because of injuries, kind of in February, right? I had to step away from the game and didn't know what I was going to be doing. David Steele was doing radio by himself. And he said, well, why don't you come sit with me and see if you like this for a little bit. The team agreed. So I had to learn. I've never done any broadcasting before or anything. So what people probably don't realize is that you have this headset on. You guys know this. You have this headset on. And even while you're broadcasting, somebody's talking to you, right? Like, especially if a commercial's coming and everything. So one of my very first games, I'll never forget, I'm making a point, right? Like we're going to break. I don't have a whole lot of time. I got to put my thought together. And in my ear, I can hear the producer saying, 10 seconds to break. And as in the middle of talking, I froze, right? Because I didn't know what to do. David Steele is looking at me. See, we're on radio, so it's okay. Nobody can see it. But he's looking at me and he's laughing. And I've got nothing. Nothing's coming out of my mouth. I don't know what to do. And right before, like, the producer is at like 3 seconds, David says, and we'll be back with more insightful commentary from Jeff Turner after this commercial break. I will never, ever forget that. It was a great lesson for me and everything like that. So David and I, we're very good friends and everything. We laugh about that today, but it was a great teacher, but it was a very teachable moment. But I will never, ever forget that as a broadcaster.
And lastly, if Dwight had stayed with the Magic, who would have had, in your opinion, the most memorable Magic career? Would it have been Shaq or Dwight?
Ooh, oh boy! I'm guessing. I'm thinking the answer to that is probably going to be Dwight, just because of the longevity of his time in Orlando. I really believe if Dwight makes a different decision and stays, the Amway Center is on Dwight Howard Boulevard. It's just, and if he stays, I just feel like a lot of things, we don't break up the thing. And that team was good enough, that group, you could have added around Dwight and you could have made another strong run to the finals, I think. So as much as I love Shaq, he's my guy. And he took us a long way just based on Dwight's longevity up until that point. I think probably Dwight.
Jeff, I'll be 100% honest with you. I find you and David Steele so entertaining to watch. If we have a game that's on national television, I won't watch it. I'll just listen to your broadcasting.
No. And that is very true.
And one of my favorite moments, I have to say, is when there's a big play and you're screaming out Papaya. I am telling you, I am in. My wife looks at me crazy sometimes because I'm screaming it right there with you. I'm running around my house, the whole nine. Can you just share with us real quick where exactly did Papaya come from? In your words, what does the word Papaya mean?
Well, this is Papaya is one of those things I just told you guys that I really try to link the past to the present a little bit. And so, back in those early days when we were an expansion team, it was different then, right? I mean, we didn't really have a star, right? We were all very competitive with one another. You never knew if you were going to be playing, not playing, or whatever that was. And so we were on each other pretty hard most of the time. So Papaya comes from, we were in a game and we're playing the Golden State Warriors. All right. This is the era of Run TMC. So Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullin, right? Yeah. And so Tim Hardaway, for whatever reason, is on fire. Okay. And Scott Skiles is guarding him. And Jerry Reynolds is injured and sitting at the end of the bench. And Terry Catledge is there with him. And they're both in street clothes. I guess Terry was injured too. They're both sitting down there in street clothes. And every time Tim would make a shot, he had to cross over, he'd make a shot. From the end of the bench, we'd hear, Papaya, Papaya. And you look down there, and it's Jerry Reynolds, right? And so the best part of this is that Skiles heard it. Skiles heard everything, right? And he was getting so red. And the rest of us, we're just kind of trying not to laugh too hard, right? Because we know it's getting under Scott's skin. And Jerry is just laughing and enjoying himself down there. Somebody told me once that this was trolling before there was the word trolling, right? Our teammates. And so that's it. And so after the game, I asked Jerry, I said, Jerry, what are you saying? And he said, Papaya. And I was like, what does that mean? And he said, man, back when I was growing up, when we were playing, cops and robbers, cowboys in India and everything, when you had the gun, it was Papaya, Papaya. That was the sound that you made and stuff. So I was like, okay, all right. And so that's, it's so now if it's a big shot, usually it's a 3 or something like that. It's Papaya, because that's it just ties the past in a little bit. And I don't know, it's fun. Sometimes I overdo it. Sometimes I don't do it enough. Hopefully it's a big moment. I get people want more. Some people are like, do away with that.
No,
I hate that.
Gotta keep
what
it.
No.
We just try to make it work and just have a little fun with it. I think, hopefully what you guys and everybody that watches the game get is that David Steele, Dante Marcatelli, our crew in the truck and everything, we're all, we spent so much time together. We are all very good friends, and we really enjoy doing the games, being together, and hopefully it just comes off as a bunch of guys that are like you. We're just watching the game. We've got a great relationship, and the chemistry's good. That's what we're after, and so if you guys are happy with it, then we're happy. So that's it just makes it fun. They're just great people to work with.
Yeah, it really honestly sounds so natural from top to bottom. And again, you guys are entertaining. And I don't care who tells you this, there's never too much Papaya. Never. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. A lot of fun. And that was Quarantine with Jeff Turner.
Thank you for listening to the OZone podcast, the voice of Magic fans.
Be sure to visit our website, theozonepod.com. And remember to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on all your favorite podcast listening platforms.